All right, so today we're going to do meanwhile. Meanwhile is interesting because it can have multiple meanings. Let's go over what those meanings can be. You could say, I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son walked to the park. Now, son is a little bit confusing because in terms of like a relationship dynamic, you don't know how old the son is. So you're gonna be like, oh, well, how old's the son? Well, why'd you leave the son? The reader's gonna be like, well, why didn't you take the son why didn't you drive the son to the park and then go to the store? How did you get to the store? Did you drive to the store? Did you walk to the store? So you went to the store, but your son walked. It's like this is more specific than this is, and this is a little bit, in terms of the obvious relationship. So you want to be as clear as possible. So the only way that went to the store this morning makes sense is saying, meanwhile, my son stayed home because he is sick. Now it's a little bit more clear because in terms of the son parent dynamic, um, you know, it makes sense that like the son would stay home. But it's still a little bit vague because my son's staying home. So these two sentences could be talking about the morning time in general, right? Which is what it looks like. Talking about the morning time in general. Right? I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home because he is sick. But maybe the afternoon he might go out. But if the kid's sick, so what would make this even clearer? In two sentences, if you decided, hey, I want to be as clear as I can be in two sentences, extremely clear and not confusing at all. Well, this is assuming if he's staying home in the morning, he's probably going to stay home in the afternoon and the evening too because he's sick. He's probably not going to go anywhere. Um, but it's a little bit vague. Is he just staying home in the morning and then he's going to go out later, or is he just going to is he going to stay home all day? So you could say the only thing the only excursion I embarked on today was, right, this is past tense, was when I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home because he is sick. So how can we make this even clearer? You could say all day. So that makes sense, right? The only excursion I embarked on today was when I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home all day because he is sick. That's even clearer because you're showing the reader. Um, so this is talking about the entire day, right? So if I could copy and paste this, this is talking about the entire day. But you could say this might be talking about the morning time in general. Speaker might be talking about the morning time in general, right? I went to the store this morning, and my son was home because he is sick. But let's say you wanted to use, so this could be talking about entire day, right? So this is shorter. I'm talking about entire day. Okay, so this sort of assumes that it's the entire day. I went to the store this morning. Like, in terms of the whole day, out of the whole day, I went to the store this morning. However, or meanwhile, my son has stayed home because he is sick. So it's sort of it's shorter, and it forces the reader to think a bit. So it really forces the reader to think a bit. It seems to be talking about the entire day, right? It seems like it's like, but it could be talking about the morning only, right? With this morning, maybe he's sick. Maybe the son feels better. He takes a nap. Maybe he feels better, and then the evening he like goes out. So there's nothing wrong with any of these. They're grammatically correct. They're good uses of however. So the big question is, the $1,000,000 question obviously is, what sentence or sentences are going to follow this, and so if something's vague, the beauty of writing is or speaking, right, is you get to clarify, right? You get to get even more granular, even more specific. So I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home because he is sick. Okay, so that's probably talking about the morning time in general, right? And it's pretty sure, and it's pretty clear. Meanwhile, in this case, doesn't have to do with time. It's not like a temporal word, or having to do with time. It's basically at the same time, right? At the same time, my son stayed home because he is sick. But it's yeah. Excuse me, I'm gonna scratch that. It is a temporal word. It's basically saying literally at the same time. I went to the store this morning. At the same time, my son stayed home because he is sick. And it usually means the other. Usually the activity is the other, right? So there's contrast. So your activity is going to the store or going out, right? The meanwhile is, so you're not going to say, I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son went to the store too. That doesn't really make sense, right? So it's not even usually, it's always. So if you could say, I went to the store this morning, meanwhile my son went to the beach. There is a contrast there, right? Because the store and the beach are two different places. So there's that contrast. Or you could say, I went to the store this morning, meanwhile my son stayed home. So the contrast there is going out versus staying home versus staying in. So being out versus being in. As long as there's a very clear sort of contrast in terms of the activity or the verb, then you generally use meanwhile. It's okay, so let's do this. Went to the store this morning, meanwhile my son's at home because he's sick. It's shorter. It's shorter than this one. Shorter than the next one. The next example. Okay. So, I mean, this is the same thing. So if you said this morning, it's a little bit repetitive. I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home this morning because he's sick. I mean, I guess it could work. It depends on the effect you're really trying to go for. But, it seems a little bit repetitive. So I would actually force the reader to stretch a little bit. Um, and so these are, you know, this can connect to this. It could be the morning time in general, but it could also be talking about the entire day. Now this is super clear, right? Clear, very clear, but it's longer, right? It's saying, so the clarity of what time period are you talking about? The only excursion I embarked on today, the whole day, right before you go to bed, assuming when you get up before you go to bed, was when I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home all day because he is sick. Now, let's say you deleted this all day. Is that clear? Let's read it. The only excursion I embarked on today was when I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home because he is sick. Well, you know what? All day isn't necessary. All day is a teeny bit extraneous, um, because if the because you're kind of pushing the reader, you're encouraging the reader to to do a little bit of work. But if you wanted to make it super clear, then you would keep all day. Because as opposed to saying, "Oh, did my son stay home this morning because he's sick, or did he stay home all day?" So the only excursion I embarked on today was when I went to the store this morning. Meanwhile, my son stayed home all day, which is kind of good because it's a different phrasing than today, right? All day because he is sick. It makes sense. Expression. So and then the meanwhile makes sense too because he's talking about going out versus staying in. His son who stays in. Yeah. So hopefully this helps a little. Thank you very much.